Welcome to this week's episode of the CPG View, the number one CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining this week's episode of the CPG View. I've gotten to know you recently through some of the trade work that we are doing together with your organization and Pattern, and just thought it would be great to get you on to talk about some of the state of what's happening with regards to tariffs and trust and trade and you're really you specialize within this space of supplements, and we specialize in marketplaces. So thought this would be a great time to get together and share some best practices and learnings. But before we do that, would you mind introducing yourself and the company or organization you're with?
With pleasure. First, thank you, Don, for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation. My background, pretty straightforward. Well, my background starts in politics. I worked in the United States Senate for Senator Orrin Hatch, who supplement users may know as the godfather of the supplement industry. And from there, I went to law school. And from there, I went to work at Nature's Way, a well-known brand of dietary supplements. So interesting background of politics, law, and dietary supplements.
Yeah, there you go.
And that was, so I've been in the industry 45 years. And I came at a very formative time when the industry was about $6 billion maybe, and now we're 70 plus. And it was a very different time. No one quite knew what to make of health food stores at that time, and certainly supplements. It was brand new to me, no experience. So it's been quite a ride for me to enter this industry, and it's been absolutely fascinating. I've had a chance to travel the world, meet a whole lot of interesting people, work on some very interesting issues. Ultimately, when I left Nature's Way after 10 years, this was a very dark time for our industry, is that FDA was really hunting us down. They just did not like dietary supplements. And the reason is that their world at FDA is foods and drugs. It's the Food and Drug Administration, and we were neither as they saw us. And so they continually argued that our products were unlawful, couldn't be sold. And we were arguing, wait a minute, we were here long before drugs were. We've been around since the beginning of time in herbs, nutrition, and FDA persisted and said, no, we win. We're the government, you're not. So we get to make the call. And this is when it led me to phone my old boss, Orrin Hatch, and I said, we need some help. We do. We've done everything we can. We've talked to FDA. We've talked to everyone, tried to resolve this. And I'm speaking now of the collective industry. And so our organization, the United Natural Products Alliance, or UNPA, was formed in 1991 with one goal. And we thought we'd be around for maybe 3 months because this probably wasn't going to work, was to develop a legislative model for dietary supplements. And that would require congressional approval in the form of legislation, not a small thing. And so 8 Utah companies, I'm based here in Salt Lake City, and Utah is a very large center for dietary supplements. We're about a $15 to $16 billion industry just here in Utah.
Wow.
And so we had a lot of economic muscle, but we also had strong political relationships. Long story short, our bill was called the Health Freedom Act, very much intentionally. It was introduced in June of 92 and became law in October of 1994. And that was the moment that our industry really changed, is we were now recognized as a legitimate category, and we're part of foods, but we're regulated as a subcategory, and that transformed things. What it brought was confidence for us in the industry that we're legit, we beat the man. Yeah. And then Wall Street said, this looks pretty interesting. Now we have certainty that you're not going away, money would flow in, big boxes started taking a look, and so the industry very quickly began to grow. And so from then to now, I've continued to run UNPA. It turns out there's a whole lot of things you need to do to keep a dietary supplement industry going. We have a very complex supply chain. We have millions of consumers, many of whom are eager for education, knowledge, information, what's new, what's trending. And with the evolution of e-commerce, there's even more interest about product quality and trustworthy brands. And things are moving so quickly that not a day goes by that there is literally not something new that we've got to think through.
Well, I did not realize that was the depth of the backstory there. I really love the fact that you thought it was only going to be around for a few months, and it's been, 20 plus years or so with that you've been in this, and that's super exciting. And I think I shared this with you too. I have similar kind of, maybe not personality quirks, but tendencies of, like, I like to build things, and some of the things I've been associated with. This podcast was probably, we thought was only going to work and be a fluke, and it has done the opposite. And there's another organization I'm a part of that has done similar. So we have that very much in common. Well, I'm ready to dive in. Callie, do you want to get going on our question here with regards to tariffs?
Definitely. Lauren, just first of all, we really appreciate you and all you have done and all you continue to do for the dietary supplement community. It's really cool to see the impact that you've had and your organization has had. And I've just been impressed by how in touch you are with just what's happening and what's top of mind for everybody. Obviously, right now, tariffs are a huge
Oh, yeah.
subject matter, and it's really what's on everybody's mind. So
Mhm.
we're excited to just pick your brain on that a little bit today and learn more from you. So I guess to start off, how have you seen tariffs impacting the landed cost structure and margin pressure for dietary supplement brands?
Wow. Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Every day is like Christmas morning. What's under the tree today? There's something new and different that's happened. Tariffs have completely altered the landscape for all industries, very much so for the dietary supplement industry. Several obvious reasons. Well, obvious to me, but let's pretend that we have an audience that doesn't know much about our industry. First is we have a very strong and long relationship with China as a raw material supplier. They also produce a lot of technical equipment like analytical instruments for laboratories and testing, things of that nature. They produce the vast majority of the world's nutrients, and some of them 100%. They're only made in China. They also have a very high percent of the inputs are made and run through China, as well as premixes. A lot of industries use premixes of vitamins and minerals, different things that are very specifically designed, for example, for chickens or cows. They take vitamins too, just like people do, but they're very scientifically designed and controlled as feed animals. So number one is China is very important to our industry as a supplier. I've been to more Chinese cities than American cities, believe it or not. And I have visited dozens of facilities. We have worked with the government, with trade organizations there. We continue to. But when the United States decided to address the issue of trade barriers, and this is where I'm going to make a distinction between tariffs, which is the money side of it, and the trade barriers, which is the real issue here. And tariffs are being used as the baseball bat, if you will, to get the attention of China by dramatically raising tariff rates to rates that we've never seen. So first, how fast it happened. That's number one. Is normally you have some sense of planning. You're going to be 3, 6, 9 months out and running your inventory forecasting. And you've got your group of brokers and suppliers you work with. Very often you'll lock in prices. And when suddenly, boom, we were faced with tariffs of in excess of 100%. And then I was giving a talk, this is about a month ago, and it happened to be on the day when the US and China got into the tariff war. So I spoke at 11 o'clock Central Time. And so I had a slide.
I see where this is going.
Yeah, I was showing, here are the tariffs as of 11, and I did say as of 11 o'clock. We broke then during my lecture, somebody raised their hand in the audience and said, I'm reading the news, it just went up 25 points. And by the time we got back from lunch, it had gone up another 45 points. And all in the space of about 2 hours. And so people's phones are lighting up, and they've got purchasing on the other side saying, what do we do? What do we do? And you had a lot of product on the water coming over, and nobody knew what the tariff rate was going to be. Are they going to get hit with 145%, or what's happening? So confusion everywhere and uncertainty everywhere. The question that first arises is, all right, if this is really the new tariff rates, who's going to pay for it? And so then you have these frantic conversations with the supplier. And typically in the past, when you see tariff issues in the 10 or 15% range, that you can spread through the supply chain. And that's considered fairly normal. Supplier will take maybe a third of that. The brokers will take a third. The retailer or contract manufacturer takes a slice, and then the brand will kick in as well. And you try and flatten that tariff, and there might be a few points that the consumer would see. And it depends on industries. Right. Is for big CPG products, we ran some calculations and talked to some of our friends. And for example, a Chick-fil-A would see a price difference of 2 cents, even under these high tariff conditions. In dietary supplements, it's going to be way more than that. So for nutrients, botanicals, where we're heavily dependent on China, we're talking potentially to consumer increased points of 25 to 45%. That's gigantic. And so what's happened is companies have reacted by building into their supply agreements is we are not going to pay for tariffs. We're going to pass that through. So if everybody is passing the tariff through, unlike previous practice, which was let's split it up, is not me this time. I'm not taking the hit. Mm-hmm. And so that drives the price point to consumer at levels we've never seen.
Yeah.
And on e-commerce, this is a huge deal,
right?
Where price sensitivity is clearly going to be a big issue. And you have your legacy brands, and then you have Amazon-only brands. So for that Amazon-only group, is they live and die based on their price point and based on their supply availability. So if they're stuck where they can't get raw material at any price, that's a very serious problem that could put you out of business.
Right. And Laura, I wanted to ask you, kind of to your earlier point, as we think about trade disputes, specifically between the US and China, and how do you think we should think about the reshaping of global sourcing strategies for e-commerce-first supplement brands? You mentioned that Utah alone, you mentioned several $1 billion in that sector, specifically within that location. So any, best practice or two as you think about that?
Several things. Is where China is the sole supplier, you have no options. So, and that's a particular problem for the supplement industry, as it is for everyone who uses nutrients. So there isn't a plan B because nobody else makes them. They're not domestically produced. You can't find them in Europe. People say, yeah, but I buy mine from Germany. Say, you bought it from Germany, but it was made in China. And so even when you look at tariff and codes and customs numbers of where things come from that are imported, it'll come from all over the world. So one of the grievances that the US has raised is transshipping, where goods will leave China, go to Vietnam, be relabeled and shipped from Vietnam to the US or someplace else. Interestingly, guess who our number 4 global trade partner is? Vietnam. You would never think that.
Right.
But this is the reason why. So best practices, number 1 is work direct with suppliers in China. Right now, there are probably between 3 to 5 touches, meaning the brokers, between the actual physical manufacturing site and when it gets into the hands of the brand holder. And so that adds margin, but that also adds mystery and complexity to whose product is that really? Where did it come from? Interestingly, in this case, when there was a lot of talk about tariffs 4 or 5 months ago, the market didn't react and forward buy because I don't believe they thought this was going to happen.
Agreed.
So consequently, everybody got caught pretty much at the same level. And then the scramble was on. That shifts you into the spot markets, which is not a good place to be. you're paying a higher price with a lot less certainty of the quality of the material. So best practice going forward, because we can look back and say, I wish I would have done a lot of things differently, is now is the time, because we have this 90-day pause where the US and China backed down and said, okay, let's bring tariff rates down to a much more sane level. So for China, it's 30% tariff coming into the US. What's interesting, of that 30%, 20% is the tariff on fentanyl. And that's called a 301, Section 301 tariff. It's very hard to get rid of those, where we see the White House is calling out new tariff numbers at will. You can't do that with a 301 tariff, which is why it's still there. Then the global 10% rate was added to the 20. That's where we get to 30.
Got it.
So 90 days. And so people are now scrambling to forward buy. The big problem, shipping capacity, is a lot of the boats are in the wrong places, and they got rediverted to other markets as China decided to reject US orders and redeploy them for the domestic Chinese market, or to move them into ASEAN, into the South American market. So a lot of these vessels are not on their usual Trans-Pacific Shanghai to Long Beach, and that's going to take time to get them realigned. Shipping rates have gone way up.
I think one of the things too, like I take from this, Callie, we can move to your question now, but Lauren and Lauren, you're not paying me or Callie to say this, is like, this is complex and this is a lot of moving pieces. I would encourage folks in this space, and I actually just got off the call an hour ago with the president of a company that in this space specifically, and we weren't even talking about this topic we're talking about, but just the complexity we were talking about. And I would encourage you to reach out to Lauren, look up, UNPA online. I'm sure you can also connect through us. I mean, for me, the takeaway is there's complexity there. That old saying comes from the military, VUCA. Have you heard that, Lauren? That term, VUCA, stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think given the rate of change we're seeing, that will only continue. So anyway, I wanted to mention that, because even if folks listen to what you just said, it's like, well, how do I need to get closer to the maybe source of truth or a community that's talking about this, solving for this together. I would encourage them to reach out to you. So
thank you. Yeah, we'd welcome that. We have a very active communication flow right now. Usually it's 1 or 2 memos a day to break down and explain what's happening. So most recently, the trade negotiation in Geneva, to explain what really happened there. What can we expect to see happening now during and after this 90-day pause? And so knowledge is power, number one, and that will make the difference in winning and losing in the marketplace. If you're able to correctly anticipate what by all accounts is very difficult to forecast.
Awesome.
Yeah, I spent 80% of my day working on this very issue, and I'm still trying to figure out what's the next best move.
Right. Awesome.
Cool. Well, shifting gears a little bit, Lauren, given all of the uncertainty that we're talking about, from UNPA's vantage point, how prepared do you think the VMS industry is to navigate all of the growing regulatory and trade complexities while they look to scale globally via platforms like Amazon?
Boy, yeah, Amazon's a specific case. Generally, I think on the regulatory, I feel we're pretty solid. There's a lot of very skilled and experienced regulatory specialists inside the supplement industry. And so I think that we can see and understand what we need to do, both domestically and then on the international front. The harder part really is going to be the trade complexity. We have far fewer people that really understand the nuances of customs and of tariff codes and of the global shipping system itself, as well as in the case of China specifically, how opaque that marketplace can be when you're buying product. That's where I think that we will continue to have challenges. is just to get information that we consider both trustworthy and actionable. And again, it's whoever gets that right will be successful. I think Amazon is faced with some unique challenges. And interesting storyline a couple of weeks ago, it was reported that Amazon was going to post what the tariff amount was in the cost of products that would be on Amazon. And the White House didn't appreciate that. And so very quickly said that we really hope that you won't do that. In fact, Amazon had thought about doing something like that with Temu, and Shein has the same problem. So it's a slight digression, but it really isn't, is the de minimis shipment of goods is a much bigger issue than most people realize. So what de minimis is, it used to be a rule, now changed, which I'll explain. Any personal shipment of valued at $800 or less could enter the country without tariff or duty. It was free. And just take a wild guess at the 2024 dollar value of these de minimis little packages that were being shipped into the US.
Given how fast Temu and Shein and a few others have exploded, I would guess it's massive.
$73 billion.
Wow.
Wow.
Way big. It's the same
Wow.
size as the whole dietary supplement industry. That's how big it is.
Wow.
Right. So what's happened is, and China dominates the de minimis shipping game. And so that's where Shein and Temu, that's their sweet spot, is using the de minimis rule. That's why they could sell at such low prices. Well, they got hammered. That 800 went down to 25 and would pay, and then now it's gone to 200. And you have to pay full tariff rates. So it blew up that business model right there.
Wow. Well, Lauren, I want to ask you, I want to keep us on time and be respectful of your time on a Friday. Last question for you. With the growing scrutiny around claims, testing, transparency, and things like that, how is UNPA helping brands compete responsibly on these digital shelves we've been talking about, where it's all about speed and consumer trust is obviously critical in the formula?
Absolutely. Daunting challenge. We have an Amazon working group within our membership, and it's designed to really zero in and focus on Amazon only types of issues. So what is Amazon requiring from a dietary supplement company in terms of regulatory compliance, what claims can be made, all of these sorts of things? They have lists of ingredients that are not permitted. And it's difficult to really stay on top of what Amazon is telling the ASIN holder. And so we try to help navigate that by working directly with Amazon, and particularly in concert with Pattern, who is the professional, the expert on these e-commerce matters. And so as a member, Pattern has been exceptionally valuable for us as a resource. When we don't know, we call Pattern to find out what's going on. And so thank you for that. Quality is a real challenging issue on Amazon, again, because you have this bifurcated marketplace of legacy brands, super high quality, and then you dip down into the Amazon only brands, which are a mystery to me, both in terms of who the company is, where they are, what's in the product. And I think that's probably the greatest challenge. My advice to an e-commerce shopper is you really have to do that due diligence and try and understand if this is an original made by as a brand, or if this is produced by another company, or it's a name that sounds really familiar, but it's not the same product. In the last month, I've had to make 4 or 5 phone calls to one of our members, actually 4 or 5 of our members that are very prominent on Amazon. And I've taken photos of a label and asked, is this yours? And it'll take them about a day because they really scrutinize it. And sometimes they'll say, this is a really good copy, but it's not ours. The same thing is happening with certificates of analysis, where Amazon has suddenly been faced with this problem of fake certificates, which you have to present when you sell the product. So they've had a team of people trying to figure out what's fake and what's real. And now they've changed the rule to use what they call TICs. These are 3 organizations that certify, audit, and verify the product quality. Still a work in process. It's super complicated when you're dealing with e-commerce at the speed that they operate at. Then you add the complexities of a global supply chain that's constantly moving. So it's like speeding down the street trying to change a tire at the same time. It's just pretty hard to do.
Yeah, that's right. With gas prices going from $5 a gallon to $40 a gallon along the way, right?
Pretty much, yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, Lauren, wanted to just thank you again so much for taking some time with Callie and I. Really enjoyed our partnership with, Pattern and UNPA, and under your leadership, just think the organization's going in all the right places and really aligned with your mission as an organization. So just wanted to say thank you on our behalf. And I wanted to offer you up. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with in closing?
Well, I would just say uncertainty is going to persist. Get used to it. Stay informed. The trick right now is you have to make an extra effort, bring in extra people, consultants, advisors, to try and keep you as absolutely current, because things are going to keep changing very unexpectedly. And even a 60-minute window of knowledge could make a big difference in how you're making decisions. Literally, it's coming down to that. And so speed, and I would say forecasting correctly, is going to be based on who knows the most. And that will take time and effort, but it's doable. So I just wish everybody well in these very chaotic times. Let's hope it smooths out here somewhere in the next, 12, 18 months. I think it's going to take that long to get to a point where we feel like things are somewhat normal. And if it happens sooner, terrific. But let's be in this for the long haul. Our objective is to learn, get better, and be smarter along the way so that we can react more quickly to the unexpected. So we'll treat this as kind of a military training course, is to get us out into the field and really stress test us and see how well we can do.
There you go. I think one thing you said there reminds me, I do come from a military family, but the one thing that, data alone, what I've read, and I subscribe to this thought process, you want to live in this triangle, and the triangle is data, dialogue, and speed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually what you were just describing, that you want to have the data, the advisors, the consultants, whomever, get as much data as you possibly can, have discussions and dialogue around that data, and then execute and iterate and run that cycle as many times as you possibly can. So, well, Lauren, this was great. Thank you so much on Callie and I's behalf, and look forward to continuing our partnership together with you.
It's been a real pleasure. Don, Callie, thank you very much. And the way things are going, we may want to circle back in another month or 45 days and just see where we are, and hope that this 90-day quiet moment stays that way. And if not, glad to come back and let you know what happened.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thanks,
Thank
Lauren.
you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the CPG View, the #1 CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders.